Welcome back to Hot Flashes on Cool Topics, everybody. Today we have on Bess Armstrong, and we are going to be catching up with her. She is a star of film, stage, and TV. And honestly, just one of my favorites. The Four Seasons. It's a movie that has always stuck with me, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. So, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you all for having me. This is such a pleasure. And I
Well,
didn't even have to leave home.
Isn't
even
it
better.
great?
Well, we're on
Yes.
no, it's the best.
It it is nice and convenient. But we like to start the catching up series with what you're doing now. So we know that you're on I Love That For You. How was that experience?
Oh, that was wonderful. That was and actually that ended in, I guess, at the beginning of May. And I have not been doing anything since, which is really kind of like a whole new thing for me, just to kind of say, you know what, it's been a crazy year. It's been a tough year. And we had just finished a massive, like, this is an old house. Pipes were exploding. We put it off forever. We redid the bathrooms. Nightmare, nightmare, nightmare. Lived in one tiny little room for like 3.5 months. My husband's a big guy. It was an experience. So I just said, you know what? All I want to do is pull up the drawbridge and unpack boxes and not put anything away that should be thrown away. You know, it was one of those Marie Kondo moments. And I just took the summer and I actually went back east and vacationed with my sisters. And, you know, so it's been a great lazy summer, but I'm glad that it was prefaced by I Love That For You, which was just such a treat. Coming out of COVID, what a treat to do a show like that with those, just a remarkable cast. Vanessa Bayer, can't say enough about her. Jennifer Lewis, Molly Shannon, and this amazing supporting cast of the most talented actors. It's been a treat. It really has. And all about, you know, a mythical home shopping network, which, right, talk about ripe for comedy, you know, there you go.
The whole situation in that movie, I love, or not movie, television series. I love. Well, Vanessa Bayer is a cancer survivor. I think she is. Yes, yes.
She is. This is why, you know, and when I would say to people, well, it's a comedy, but it's a little bit based on Vanessa's life. You know, she was a cancer survivor. People go, wait, what? A comedy? You know, and yet it's really funny. The whole idea that what Vanessa shared with me is she is an adored only child, and her parents. Only child? Did she have a brother? Wait, I'm thinking, but her parents, wonderful, loving, close-knit family. And she had childhood leukemia and spent a lot of her adolescence, you know, and early teen years in isolation, unable to go to school and socialize. And it was things on TV that became her obsession, that became her family and her comfort zone. And one of them was home shopping. One of them was actually a show I was in called My So-Called Life, which is, I'm sure, why I ended up playing her mother in this, because she is one of the most remarkably dedicated My So-Called Life people I've ever met. And I've met a lot. So but she makes it, but the whole point in the show, Vanessa was, she was saying that her family was not above using the cancer as a way to get special perks. You know, she'd say, like in Applebee, you know, her mother would be the one to sort of go, you know, she had cancer. She has cancer. She'd really like the dessert for free. You know, that's sort of. And so, you know, she kind of got into that habit that this was something occasionally you could pull out. You could pull out the cancer card. And so the whole premise of this show is that this girl who did have cancer as a child, was in the hospital, adored the home shopping network, gets a chance to audition. And at a key moment when she may or may not get the job, blurts out, I have cancer. And therefore gets the job because the head of the network, Jennifer Lewis, played wonderfully by Jennifer Lewis, sees this as a marketing opportunity, that this can be something they exploit. And then she's stuck. How does she maneuver all of that, you know? And you know, struggles with her conscience, and of course her parents are, you know, of mixed feelings about all of that. So, you know, it's a wonderful show, and I hope if you haven't seen it that they will see it, because
it's really
Do you think
funny.
they'll bring it back? Is
Say,
it good
say
for
that
you?
again.
Do you think they'll bring it back
Well,
for
I
more?
hope so. I keep checking now every day. I know we have a wonderful little group cast text, and I know that the minute Vanessa knows anything, we will all know. It did really well. So I'm more than optimistic about this. It really was a hit, and it is a hit. And so I feel good about that, because here's what I would love. I would love to get a chance to do a season with a normal shooting experience. COVID, I actually ended up shooting all through COVID, even pre-vaccine. And, the studios did an amazing job of rising to this challenge. But I am tired of pouring cups of tea down my front because of the plexiglass shield that they make you wear, which I then forget I'm wearing.
Can you take us back to the beginning of your career and how it got started? And I know
Oh,
you went to Brown and all that.
I remember that. Yes. So, well, I acting. I had one of those blessed childhoods that people laugh about. They sound so like cliche and improbable, but my parents were school teachers. They met and married in their 30s, which for 1950 was scandalous. They had both served in World War II in the Navy. My dad was a naval officer in the Pacific arena, got sunk on a ship and all that sort of stuff. And my mom was a code breaker. She was plucked out of college, senior year, to go be a top secret code breaker for the Navy.
Wow.
I know
Wow.
she was a formidable brain and a amazing woman. And I can speak about her brain because, we're all just fine, but nobody inherited that particular freakish brain. She could absorb a language dead or alive in a nanosecond, and she could spot patterns. To the day she died at almost 97, she could point with her cane and spot four-leaf clovers. She
She
had
sounds amazing.
Oh my
amazing
goodness.
brain. So, after the war, she went back to finish her PhD in really useful medieval Romance languages, sort of the lingua of the household. And dad was, and they met, in their 30s, and they got married. And they had both had difficult childhoods, being moved a lot and this and that. And all they wanted was to settle down and never move again. And they built a house out in the country, and they never moved. They both left the house feet first, which is what they had said they wanted to do. And so we grew up on 6.5 acres out in Baltimore County with a lot of dogs. And my parents were both very musical and loved theater. They both had an opportunity to try professional theater. And in my mom's case, that was thwarted by the war. And well, actually, in both of their cases, but they had realized they weren't temperamentally suited. So they settled down to teaching. My dad taught English and directed most of the school plays. And my mom taught Latin, Greek, other really useful. My family. When I went to college and majored in theater, they said, well, I actually first majored in classics, but I said I really want to try to be in theater, classics being Latin and Greek. And the line in the family was, well, thank God, being a classics major, at least she will always have something really concrete to fall back on. But they were wonderful. They were academic. They were lovely people who were simply delighted to wake up with each other every morning and delighted to have all of us. Everybody said, you're in your 30s, don't have children. They had 5.
Wow.
There you go. And well, most of it was pursuing that boy. They had twin girls. Then 20 months later, they had me, such a disappointment. Then 20 months later, they had my brother. They got the prince. Hooray. They stopped. Well, 6 years later, oops.
Oh,
The
boy.
cocktail baby came along. My little sister, who is my person, my dearest friend. So thank God they had her. And, so we grew up, that was how we grew up, singing 4-part harmony around the piano. We all played instruments. We had no TV. We read books. We, went to little lakes in the summer and canoed and, it was like ridiculous. And I now realize how incredibly rare and special that was, and can only be grateful to them. And but so I got to grow up surrounded by the arts. And with Dad directing the plays, I also got to go to rehearsals and sit there and wonder, oh, will I ever be big enough to do this? And watch them put makeup on people before the performances. And the whole world just dazzled me from the beginning. It really did. And so I was acting, starting in a little bit in junior high and then high school, and playing music. I played the violin, and and their deal with me, imagine this in today's parents, how pushy they have to be about schools and colleges. My parents sort of looked at me and said, look, we know you could do a lot better. Every report card says Bessie is just not living up to her full potential. But they said, as long as you stay on the honor roll, we'll stay out of your way. So I was in an electric band, and I was in quartets and orchestras, and I was in plays, and they stayed out of my way as long as I just eked out that honor roll grade. And we were faculty brats because they were teachers. So we were raised in the schools where they were teachers, a girls' school and a boys' school across the street from each other. 14-year lifer in uniforms in a girls' school, the Bryn Mawr School for Girls. And almost went to Bryn Mawr College. I'm glad I went to Brown. It was time to actually be in a classroom with boys. That was.
And did you enjoy that?
I did. I'd say I was a little immature for it. I was 17 when I got to college. I was a little immature for that. Between my life with the girls and being 17, I was not quite ready for it, especially in 1971. There I am once again dating myself. Yes, 1971 was when I went off to college, and it was a very free world, right? Sex washed off. Am I allowed to say that?
You are, yeah.
You absolutely can say that.
My husband has often said that, given where we are in terms of our age. We were that generation that lived from the beginning of it and to the end of the period where sex washed off, so to speak, both in terms reputationally and in terms physically. That the world has changed, but it's hard in a way to talk to young people now and make them understand that back then the world was really opening up, and what you were being challenged to do, for better or worse, was leave these inhibitions of the 50s and 60s behind, and not put so much weight on these things. I guess there were good reasons for it back then. I was not very good at it. I was sort of a monogamist and a little bit shy and all that sort of stuff. But so yeah, I got to Brown, and at Brown, again, started acting and fell in love with it. And by the time I got out of Brown, I had, been in just dozens of plays. I had directed plays, which I actually think, if life hadn't happened the way it had with me hitting as young as I had hit, I actually think that might have been the direction I ended up pursuing. Again, the world is a different place now, in that young actors can do it all. And I would recommend that they do actually branch out, direct any opportunity you have, seize it in terms of directing, producing, run a camera, do anything. The more you know how to do, the longer and more versatile and interesting your career will be. It wasn't quite there in my day.
Yeah, things seemed like they were very distinct in that day.
And it was like TV and then film.
Or then film.
Absolutely. And see, I went to New York after college with my parents' blessing, which was key. Because again, there was this, one of my sisters is a school teacher, really took over the whole Latin and Greek thing for my mother. I wondered if they thought that I was being silly by trying. And, to hear from them, oh no, you know what? We think you might even have a shot. And absolutely, you've got to go give this a try. Was just, again, I now, hearing stories from so many of my fellow actors and how unsupportive their parents were, I again realized, wasn't I blessed? And they were truly always, for all of us five, our staunchest supporters. And I went off to New York with a a friend from Brown. She and I had directed musicals together, and she was this marvelous pianist and conductor. And we moved to New York. We each had maybe $1,000 to our name. And she said, I'm going to be a conductor on Broadway. Unheard of, right, for women. And I said, no, I'm going to be an actress. And we both did.
Wow.
We both did. She went on to have a lifelong career. She's still working as a musical director and conductor. And I did okay. But I got to New York, and right away, my only goal was theater. All I wanted to do was get to Broadway, and it's the only thing I haven't done. It was my only goal. And I was within 6 months of getting to New York, I had a part-time day job as a secretary to a beat poet in the Village, again, pursuing really viable career options. He was secretary to a beat poet. But I got into a little off Broadway theater company called the Perry Street Theater. And one of their first productions was Twelfth Night, Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. And I got to play Viola. And some of the other actors in that show already had agents. In those days, and I don't know if it still works this way, you could moonlight with agents. You could just work with several, at a time, and see if one of them got more work for the, it was just a way of getting out there more often. And some of these actors' agents came to see Twelfth Night, and several of them offered to take me on a non-signed basis and begin sending me out. And what I started going up for almost right away were commercials. And it was like, oh my God, a camera. What do I had no idea. I was used to playing to the back of the house, way out here. And with a camera, it was right in my face. And it was like, I was so inhibited. I had no idea how to do it. And I think one day reading through some script for like a Bold detergent commercial, Bold breaks the hold that dirt has on, or something like that. I found myself staring at a doorknob and imagining that the doorknob was the camera. And all of a sudden I got it. It was like, oh no, you're selling to this doorknob right in front of you. That's who you're talking to. And I went in and I got that commercial, and it was a national, which was a big deal. And in the next month and a half, I landed 6 more national commercials. Like Crisco and diapers and baby powder and, the Procter and Gamble, young mom. And then they started sending me out on television in the first pilot season, since I had been working with them. And in that pilot season, I got 2 pilot offers on one day and a soap opera. And I had no idea how any of this worked. And I left I was very shy around these agents. I left a really polite little note before the days of texts or anything like that. I left a little note for them. I went up to the office and said, oh no, don't bother them. I'll just leave them a note. And I left them a note saying, so I got offered this, I got offered this, and then I got offered this soap opera. That's so exciting. Can I do all of them? And I left town for the weekend. And by the time I got back on Monday morning, my answering machine had exploded and my phone was ringing off the hook. And they were like, no, you can't do them all at once. The way a pilot works is you have to choose one. What are we doing here? And it turned out that one of them was actually a screen test, not a flat out offer. But it was the only one of the 3 that was shot in front of a live audience. And that was all I knew. And I said, I'm going to gamble on that. And I gambled and I did that screen test and I got the role. And it was for a CBS sitcom called On Our Own, about 2 young gals making it in advertising in New York City. And they were the tall one and the short one. And the short one was the little waspy copywriter, and the tall one was the sort of like, I guess they decided it was ultimately Italian. They just at that point said ethnic, dark, tall. And she was the one who did the art direction. And so this was in the day when there were only 3 networks. And so if you were the star of a network show, it was kind of a big deal. We were 22. And it really was, I look back on it now, and she and I are still friends and still talk about it. Lenny Green, she went on to be a really spectacular writer in television. Lenny and I still talk about it. It was an abduction of sorts. You know, on the one hand, all you can do is be phenomenally grateful, because the business has to be preparation meets opportunity meets luck. Those three things, you know, and all three are necessary. You can be totally prepared. If you don't get the opportunity or the luck, it's too bad, but it happens. And the same thing, you know, the opportunity was this, the luck was, would it go or not, you know? And it did. The pilot sold. And there, the two of us were 22 years old, the star of a CBS sitcom. And it was wonderful, but at the same time, neither of us was really prepared for it. And, you know, your weekends aren't your own. Every weekend they're flying you around the country, since Zoom didn't exist, to meet with different affiliates. And they would put you up in these luxurious rooms, and you'd be going, oh my gosh, look, flowers. Oh my gosh, a fruit basket. But you would be whisked off to a little sound booth where you would spend the entire day meeting affiliates at 20-minute intervals, you know, who would come in and do their little spiel with you. So it sounded so glamorous. And on one level it was, and we were grateful. But on the other hand, it was a very tough life. You had no time to yourself, no personal life at all. I had been moving out of an apartment when this all started and hadn't had a chance to look for a new one, and made friends with the young costume designer. She's still one of my dearest friends to this day, who had rented an apartment in New York. She was from LA. And she said, oh, I've got a great big living room with a couch. Just move in with me until you find your own place. And I spent the entire year shooting this show, living out of a plastic suitcase, which lived under her couch, and I slept on her couch every night. That was where I lived, doing this, you know, while living this supposedly incredibly glamorous life. So it was like being shot out of a cannon. And it was not a normal beginning as an actor, you know, it really was the stuff that Hollywood stories are made of. So on the one hand, again, I say I am only grateful, but on the other hand, in retrospect, I can see that to have had a few years of seasoning, a few years to be out there learning the trade, learning, just gaining experience would have been great, you know, but we don't get to choose, right? We can only for any opportunity. So that's how I began, and spent any number of years in television, avoiding going back into another series, because I kept thinking, but why can't I cross over? Why can't I cross over? And then, so I did tons of movies of the week and things like that. And then I got the 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And
I love that. You have to tell that story, please.
So I got this movie, huge deal. Alan Alda, just coming off of MASH, one of the hugest stars in the world. And this was the first movie that he wrote and was going to direct, as well as star in. And the rest of the cast was Carol Burnett, Rita Moreno, Len Cariou, Sandy Dennis, and Jack Weston. These were just all formidable established older talents, right? But again, I'm 25 or 26 by now, I guess 25. And I was saying to friends, it is so exciting. I got this movie, guys, and it's this really cool role. I mean, I can't tell you much about it because it would ruin the movie, but you know, she's kind of the only young person in the movie, and it's great. I said, the only problem is this really, you know, it's an old person's movie, and nobody's going to want to watch this. You know, I mean, let's be honest, you know, it's all about older people, you know, I mean, God, I don't know. I mean, they're over 40. Yeah, so that was, so when I came out and it was this ginormous hit, I was like, whoa, are there that many older people in the world? Who knew? I mean, I was watching this. And then I cut to about 5 or 6 years ago, it was the 35th anniversary of this movie. And there was a film festival over here in the west side of LA that reached out to Alan and said, we'd like to do a screening. Would you come out for a Q&A? And he said, you know what? I don't normally do that, but I love this movie and I'm going to do it. And he invited me and Carol to join him for that evening and that Q&A. And two things about it. One was a girlfriend went with me as my sort of date. My husband was working somewhere, was out of town. He's a movie producer and he was not in town. So she went with me. And halfway through the movie, she turns to me and she goes, "Baby, can we talk about how hot you were?" I know, right? So why did I think I looked so horrible? Oh my God. I'm looking at myself now at 60, right? I'm looking at myself going, wait a second. What was it that I was so hung up on, so inhibited by? Youth is beautiful. Youth is just pretty. It doesn't, do you know what I mean? That's what I want to say to every young person. You have no idea how much youth in itself is just beauty itself. But for me, all I could think about was my stomach wasn't flat enough. I didn't like my legs. I didn't like this. My waist was too short. Oh, my chest was too flat. That's all I could think about. So there I am sitting there thinking, wow, what was I so hung up about? But then I was also looking at Carol and at Alan and Rita and all of them going, oh my God, they were young. They were young. What was my perspective as a 20-year-old, 25-year-old, that these people to me were over the hill? Isn't that crazy? But but it's probably good never to lose those different perspectives, right? It was fun for me at 60 to look back and then apologize to Carol and Alan. But you were old, who knew? Because now I was 60 looking back and saying, oh my gosh, you were babies too. I wasn't even on the map. You guys were human beings. You were so but that was a wonderful experience, and wonderful also in that, again, coming out of theater as opposed to television, I realized just by working with other young actors that theater had given me a level of professionalism that, if not always, I'm not in any way saying I made tons of mistakes and tons of just rube, falls, just bad moves because I was so young, and that's inevitable. It's part of being young. But having been trained since I was a kid in theater, there was a level of professionalism I had about the way you act on a set that crew members began calling out to me and just saying, wow, that's different. I mean, some of it, I had to, I would, if I had props, in a scene, when they said cut at the end, I would automatically replace the props to start over. And then the prop guy began walking up going, that is my job. You don't have to do that. So it was like, oh, well, but to this day, I'm not capable of that. I am, in that sense, theater trained. But what I got to see on the Four Seasons that was really valuable was to see people who were bona fide stars. Carol and Alan, there were no bigger stars in the universe at that point than Alan Alda and Carol Burnett. And to watch the humility and grace that they had on a set, their kindness, their professionalism, that they never, ever treated any member of the crew as anybody less than themselves, that they really personified the great truth that making a movie is a team sport, and that every single person on a set has their important contribution to make, and no one deserves to be talked down to or disrespected. And that lesson I really took to heart, and hope that I have always continued in, not only in my professional life, but in my personal life. I just have a hard time with the idea that I am better than anybody else, and that I therefore, even if I were better, why would I think it was okay to treat someone badly because of that? And I credit Carol and Alan with really showing me that first and most profoundly. Well, My parents had shown me that first. I'll say that. My parents had set that example early on. But to see it from two people who were ginormous stars was wonderful. And yet they were hilariously funny and could be irreverent and mischievous, but still just always wonderfully kind and gracious.
And that's such an important lesson there too. And what great role models. Well, your parents as well, but what a great way to model how to behave, especially on a set, a movie or television set, where it's, I mean, I've like done background work and I've seen stuff, not everything, but I've seen how things can happen and how people can get on other people. But what great, to have the two big stars there behaving that way. That's great.
There are times when you have to assert yourself, but there's always a way to do it that doesn't embarrass or humiliate. I've worked with very young actors since I've gotten older, sometimes where it's necessary to kind of gently, while working, say to this young actor, not okay. No, not on my set, not with me. No, not okay. Don't. But again, it's far more effective, I found, to do that privately than to embarrass anybody
And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you, is how you see this next generation of actors, how it differs, because they have the whole world of social media. They're not just acting and going home. Everything they do is under this huge spotlight. How do you see it being different now than it was when you were just starting out?
I don't see any difference in the way they are on set. I think I'm blown away by the professionalism. I mean, you always run into the occasional person who, you just kind of want to smack down a little one way or the other, but that's right in any walk of life. No, I'd say generally speaking, this generation of actors is remarkably professional. I just think they have a whole other layer of this to deal with that we didn't, and I have to learn from them. I mean, look, I did a Hallmark movie several years ago with a young Hallmark star named Danica McKellar, and Danica was appalled when she learned that I wasn't on any social media, and actually on the spot created an Instagram account for me. Which the problem being, I don't know what the password is, and for the life of me, I can't figure out how to get into it, and change things or anything. But that's another topic. But so since then, I've kind of watched how these young, or not even so young actors, maintain this whole presence online, and I think, sadly, it's become kind of necessary, which is why I keep having on my little to-do list, learn more about social media, get better at this, actually post something. I haven't done it yet because there's something in me that balks at it. I find some of it excessive. I've watching some public figures, watching some of them strive to be relevant in really critical political moments or social moments, during Black Lives Matter or, something like that, when they were trying to twist themselves into pretzels to stay in front of their audiences and yet seem to be really more concerned about this issue. My problem is I sit there going, I don't know that I'm a voice that should be speaking out on this particular issue. I think I'm a voice that needs to listen, and learn. I'm sounding very holier than thou. I don't mean to. Like I say, I know I've got to do some of this, but I am not fluent in that at all. And young actors today dazzle me. I love that for you. Vanessa instantly started saying, guys, here's what, if you want to put something out on your platforms, blah, 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 here it is, here it is. And I'm going, oh, I could email some people. Okay. Oh, I said that word. I'm so sorry.
Fine. It's fine.
It's fine.
It's
We'll get
fine.
it.
I apologize to the listening audience, actors, sailors at heart, carnival people. I apologize. That word will not come out of my mouth again.
Oh,
It's
I have a
okay.
sign. It's on a sign in my kitchen because it's my favorite saying. Oh, so that is interesting though. I found that, like you said, people trying to just remain relevant. And sometimes
Yeah,
when they do that, then they get themselves into big trouble because people canceling people because of something they said, then you're
yeah,
canceled. So you have to be
right,
very careful about what you're saying. So I think that's really
right.
important to be a listener.
I agree. I agree. And I'm very troubled by all this canceling stuff. I gotta say, I don't know. It's the new Puritanism. Which is not to say that there weren't really good reasons for where it began, and there aren't still. I mean, boy, we all have a lot to learn, right? Man. But and for a woman of my age who came up through the business when I came up through the business, well, it's hilarious when people my age get together and start, we're like looking over our shoulders going, God, we wouldn't dare tell some of the stories about what we put up with back then. Or when you do tell younger people, they're like, well, how could you do that? How could you not have seen that? Because the world was different, okay? Because if you, as a woman, wanted to move ahead, I'm not saying you had to sell yourself, but there were certain things you put up with because the attitude was, you want to play with the big boys? Then show us you can play with the big boys. That didn't mean you had to sleep with people, but it meant you had to put up with comments and innuendo and behavior and guys cuddling and this and that. I would walk into a writer's room in my 20s just to talk about something on a show I would be on, and somebody always wanted to pull me down to sit on their lap. And in those days you just kind of tolerated it. If it was the way you were going to get heard, you put up with it. That's very hard to explain to people who have been raised in a far more enlightened age.
Mhm. Yeah.
Which for them is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, we'd like to see our children have the ability to speak up and say what they want and they mean. It's just kind of along those lines. How have you seen Hollywood change for women in our demographic for 40, 50, 60, 70? Are there as many opportunities or less opportunities?
I think at this point, television has more opportunities for women over 40, let's say over 50, because I think on the one hand, the viability period for women has lengthened. I think 40 used to be a hard out. And I think it's now 50 or over in terms of a star's viability for women. But those are rarefied cases, we're talking really the top of the top. I think for older women, we're still in this thing where it's just become easier to think in terms of 4 or 5 women of a certain age and only think in terms of them, and there are just a crazy number of remarkably talented, formidably talented older women, older actresses. I would venture to say more so than there are older talented actors out there. And there isn't all that much opportunity. The statistics are still really, really bad for women over 50. I think it's a friendlier place to work. I think that one thing I applaud 100% is that women of color have an opportunity now that they never had. Well, I think performers, actors of color have opportunity that they never had. But what I'll see now is somebody will send a project to me. If you're interested, would you be willing to meet? Would you be willing to, self-tape, whatever? And if I look at the character description and it says 60s, any ethnicity, must be able to play female, but doesn't have to be, identify as female. I go, the chances of them choosing me as a straight white woman are probably close to nothing. If I'm interested in the role, I'll still put myself out there. But instead of being bitter about that, I laugh about it, there will always be venal headmistresses and Nazis and other roles that are exclusively, the realm of older white women. That's joking, but I applaud the fact that the world has opened up to, again, these marvelous performers that just never got a shot. It's their turn. It really is. It is their turn. And it means that things are a little less interesting for me, but I've had a good run and I still work. I say it's their turn.
That's a great attitude. And that's a great way to look at it. You think about all the opportunities they did not have. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed when I look back on all the shows that I was in, and because we're talking 45 years, how lacking in diversity they were. And that wasn't conscious. It was simply the era. You would have, even in my so-called life, Wilson was, he's Hispanic and he's gay. He played Ricky. Other than that, we were a white cast. That was early 90s. The world has changed and it's about time. I have my sons, I have two boys. They're both grown up. One of them is married to a woman who identifies as brown. She's an Indian American. So her family came over from India. She was born here. She identifies as brown. And my younger son is, I guess you could say, engaged to a woman who is Black. Mm-hmm. This has been life-changing for me, not just to be working professionally with or knowing in a setting through school or something, but to have as part of our family women who grew up with such a different experience from my own. And it's been humbling. And in some ways, it's been heartbreaking. These are dynamic, remarkable women who have achieved so much in their fields. They both, as it happens, are in public health, mental health, working in minority populations. And I'm in awe of them. And yet I have seen them marginalized or disrespected in a Starbucks. It just makes me ashamed,
It's very interesting because of just different guests that we've had, and really women that aren't white women, how they're treated in the medical realm when they go to a doctor. And, women in the first place, being a woman, you're not going to be listened to as much in the medical world. Right. And if you're not white, it's that much worse. That we've had friends that same issues, same problems, go to the doctor. Somebody like me is listened to better, maybe given better treatment than someone who isn't.
Or presumptions made. That it must be this, it must be that, hypertension, blah, 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 this and that. By the way, on that note, in the last 10 years, I have switched to all women doctors, ladies, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I prefer women doctors.
It's a pleasure, the difference in the experience, because I am blessed with very good health, and I stay fit and all this sort of stuff, but I'm sorry, you reach a certain age and things start creeping in on you, stuff starts happening. Body parts start wearing out.
They do.
With that in mind, how was your experience with the transition of menopause? Was it a smooth sail or a rocky road?
I had a smooth sail, which is not, look, I had had other issues. I lost my first baby. I lost my first child when she was 6 months old, so um, uh, I I've sort of since my 30s kind of been on a road with things that were not easy, and yet always just so aware that I was going through those things, surrounded by love and support, and with the financial means to get through them and find help. And what I've been introduced to, like through that experience, because after that I spent about 10 years as a parent-to-parent volunteer, just on the phone with women for hours and hours and hours, and just what a difference that makes. It was a terrible experience, but I went through it in a way that is so much easier than so many of the women that I was privileged to meet in those 10 years or more that I spent talking to them on phones about their own similar experiences. So yeah, we all have to stick together in these things. Women are better at that than men. I got to say that. But menopause was for me a breeze. And then when I was about to turn 60, suddenly something began happening. And what I loved, I went to my OB and she checked and she said, well, this is a wait and see thing. I don't know. I loved this. I was fairly new with her and she's a wonderful OB. She called me up. She said, are you driving? Pull over. She goes, so I've been talking to some other doctors here, all women. And she said, and we suddenly thought, what the hell does she need that thing for? She doesn't need her uterus anymore. Why would we leave it in on a wait and see? Let's just get it out. And I thought, I love this attitude, and as it turned out, it was lucky they did. It was lucky they did. There was precancerous, so but I loved being in the trenches with women on that. And obviously there was more discussion to it than that. But so I had a hysterectomy at age 60. And of course, my big concerns with the hysterectomy was, well, what about, I've been using an estrogen patch and I really like having that little, what about that? And what about this, will it affect my sex life? I'm lucky enough to have a sex life. It's, well, all those things. Am I allowed to say that? Was that bad?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
We talk all about that.
Yes.
Okay. So, those were the things I was mainly focused on, and relieved to find that there were answers to that, I have been able to keep a minuscule amount of estrogen going in. Obviously, progesterone is gone. But as I say, that it turned out, wow, this was proactive on this doctor's part to just kind of go, why leave it in? You've had your babies. So you're not likely to have more at age 60. Let's just make that move. Now, I'm sure there are people listening who would go, that was foolish, this and that. I still have my ovaries, which turned out to be those of a 15-year-old, she said when she got in and looked around.
Well, there you go.
Lovely. Isn't that lovely? I do insist that she scan those 15-year-old. Let's not have any monkey business going on with them.
Yes.
But no, and in short order after that, I had to have both my hips replaced. This is what I'm saying, ladies. It all just starts falling apart after a certain point. And I'm telling you, I am honest. I was somebody who was spinning 6 days a week and yoga and this and that, and I still do yoga religiously and hike. But I had hip dysplasia as a baby, and back in the 50s, they kind of put you in a cast for 6 months and then said, "Look, all better after a bazillion X-rays." And, look, it's all fine. So, when they said, you have hip dysplasia, I said, no, I don't. That was solved. They said, no, that never gets solved, really. And basically, your hip is gone. So one after the other, both my hips replaced. I climbed mountains this summer. That was, my last one was done in 2017. And my attitude coming out of that is, because when they told me on the first one, I spent a year sure that there were alternatives to the replacement surgery. I was sure, stem cells spinning and I had hyaluronic acid, I don't know, all these things, physical therapy. I did acupuncture. Ladies, I wasted so much time and money. Hip surgery is something that is so revolutionary at this point. I'm advertising this. If they tell you you need a hip replacement, don't waste any time. Go get your freaking hip replaced. It is the recovery is not difficult, and you can regain your life. I feel in retrospect, I wasted about 3 years by holding off, well, 4 years between the year I wasted before I had the first one done and then not getting the second one done quickly. Those are 4 years of mountain climbing that I lost. 4 years of having to go, oh, I'd love to do that. You've asked me to go for a days to the mall and to a movie. That would be so much fun. But gosh, wait, I've got a market that day. And if I do that, I won't have the strength to walk. Get over it. There is life after these things. If, with a surgery like that, anybody who asks me, I say, go get it done. Be religious about the recovery. Within a month or two, within a few weeks, you'll be driving. Within a few months, you'll be, living life pretty normally. And within 6 months or a year, you will have regained all of that wonderful athleticism and zest for life that you lost. Because when you have something like that, what follows is depression. And that's what happened with me. I became depressed because I could no longer go take the walks I wanted to take with my friends and things like that. So I believe you face these things squarely. You don't run away. You do your research. You talk. If you're really lucky, you have women doctors to talk to who, understand how women talk. And not that there aren't wonderful guy doctors out there. The doctor who replaced my hips was a guy. Wouldn't want
Okay, so
no bedside manner, but boy, was he great. Boy, was he. I didn't need bedside manner. I had my husband and kids hovering over me. What I needed was the guy who knew how to do it right. And so, but you talk it out, but don't waste your life. Like we've got, it becomes more and more precious, right? Don't waste the time. Just face these things. Face them. Frequently, our fear of them is much, much worse than the actual thing. And I try to remind myself, even when it's something as stupid as an uncomfortable email I have to write, write it.
Get it done.
Put it away for a day, look at it, but write it, get it off your plate, and get on with enjoying your life.
Yes. Yeah. Those things hang over your head and make a cloud of anxiety if you just don't get it done,
And we have so many listeners that say they're not heard by doctors. So it's good to hear you say that your doctors listened to what you had to say and were proactive.
Having a female GP has been just wonderful because, so often it starts there. Just that she takes whatever I come in with seriously and views it from a woman's point of view. So I'm not poo-pooed, I'm not dismissed. It has made a huge, huge difference. It really has. So
I had one other question that I wanted to ask you about a little bit going back a ways. Love Boat. What was it like to work on Love Boat? I'm sorry. I loved Love Boat.
Okay, Colleen, your reference point here. The fourth in, they were heading back to Love Boat.
I just need to know, inquiring minds need to know what it was like to be on the Love Boat.
Well, I was a little nonplussed by that. I was shooting still on our own. This first series that I did had just finished shooting in New York. And by the way, it was a huge hit. It did not get renewed because CBS at that point the network had closed down all primetime television in New York. Nothing shot in New York. Saturday Night Live was the only nighttime show shooting in New York, period. except for us, because our producer was a guy named David Susskind, who was a talk show host and owned his own production company. He was based in New York, which is why the fluke of this little show that got shot in New York. So CBS came to David after the first season and said, we're moving you out to LA. David dug in and said no. And the network made a calculated decision. They decided, well, we want Bess, so we'll just put her in something else. We're going to cancel the show. Now, this show had Dixie Carter in it. I mean, this was a wonderful show. And but they canceled it. They just called David's bluff and canceled it. So I was on a plane heading out from New York to do a movie of the week with Richard Thomas right after this show. And Richard Thomas and Mark Harmon. We were all kids, it's so funny. Just found a Polaroid of me and Mark, and I was going, oh God, my hair. Who did that? Whoa, wow, but boy, was he cute. I got off the plane, and I didn't really have an agent in New York. My agents were agent in LA. My New York agents were these premier New York agents who were famous for discovering ingenues and juveniles. They had discovered in their day Robert Redford and Elizabeth Ashley, and their big ticket items at this point were me and Christopher Reeve, who had just signed, was doing all the Superman movies. But they didn't have a West Coast office. So I got off the plane, not knowing, who was greeting me out there, this or that. They said, we have a deal. This agent out there works with us. He's going to take care of you. And he met me and said, good news. I've just booked you on the Love Boat. And I was like, what? Wait, I'm doing an episode of the Love Boat. And he said, yes, it'll be good for you. Well, my agents in New York didn't agree, but by that time he had already said yes. So there I was doing the Love Boat. So I didn't go into it with the best attitude. That said, Gavin MacLeod was, again, one of those just delightful professionals who always looked at his enormous good luck as that. Obviously preparation and talent, but good luck. And he was as lovely a person to sort of welcome you in as there could be. And I think, I don't remember much. Oh, I remember this. I had never shot without rehearsal before, ever. Because with a sitcom, you rehearse all week and then shoot in front of a live audience. So this was my first experience with no rehearsal, and it was sort of a shocker. They moved like the wind, and quality was not always their goal. And so I remember it was some pretty soap opera-y scene with me and Grant Goodeve, I think was the name of the actor. It was from 8 is Enough. And I remember thinking, I have no idea what to do here, but it involved tears and this and that. So I sort of threw myself down and I did the scene and this and that. And the director goes, okay, cut. All right, honey, you did it. You live with it. Let's move on. That was my welcome to, multi-camera or one camera shooting. It was sort of rude awakening. I do remember that Sonny Bono was one of the other guests in the show. And I had this preconceived notion of him as sort of goofy and I don't know, I'm Sonny Bono. I'm, like not my era, blah, blah, blah. Well, Sonny Bono, I ended up sitting next to him, talking to him on the set for long periods of time. He was as smart and insightful and funny a guy as I have ever met. And when he became mayor of Palm Springs, I remember thinking, yeah, that's no mistake. This guy, that was one smart, classy guy. And he was very kind to me, which I also really appreciated. Because again, I guess my Baltimore debutante training meant that I could project like, oh, everything is fine, I'm in control. And I was a terrified little kid inside. And Sonny seemed to get that. And he was lovely.
Oh, it is so nice.
Thank you for humoring me on that.
Yes. Well, I remember HBO. It's right when we got cable and Barefoot in the Park. So I must have watched with Richard Thomas. I must
Yes,
have watched that 50 times because
that was my second time round with Richard. So we were good
yes,
buddies by then. And he had those baby triplets. I mean, it was
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
triplets. So it was also exotic, and talk about another pro. I mean, Richard can do it all, stage, everything. And so he was another great person to work with. What was challenging about that, and I had also done that role before in summer theater while I was in college. I had done that role simultaneously playing Laura in Barefoot and Laura in the Glass Menagerie and Eliza in Pygmalion. That's repertory theater. You've got those three roles all in your head at once. You're doing, do you know what I mean?
Oh my goodness.
That's the wonderful experience of theater that you never, I mean, it's like a tightrope walk, right? You don't want to come out with the wrong lines on the wrong night. But so I knew the role. So we were doing it, but this was HBO's first attempt at filming a live performance, filming a play in front of a live audience. And so they were new at it. And they put us in an old theater up in Seattle, Washington, that was, it was an amazing theater. It was made out of wood. It had 3 balcony tiers. I think the highest one you couldn't be in anymore. It's sort of been like they closed that to the public, structurally. But the acoustics in this place were absolutely brilliant. But it was like a 2,000 seat house or something. And so they put us, and both of us were stage trained, as was Hans Codreed and Barbara Barry, who were playing the other 2 roles. And Jamie Cromwell played the telephone repair guy. How about that? So 5 actors, all stage trained. They put us in this enormous house and asked us to play to the cameras that were right there in front of the front row. Well, I had maybe the toughest time with that, because you put me in front of a big house of people, I'm going to play to the back row because they deserve to hear the show. But it's a very different thing than playing for a camera. So I was never quite sure whether we got the balance right or not,
Oh, well, I loved it. I
Oh,
loved it.
yeah. It's one of those ones, I hadn't been able to find a link to it or see it in a long time. And I remember, maybe 10 years ago or so, my younger son, who was a challenge, he was in those challenging teenage years, never saw a dare he wouldn't take. Just for Mother's Day one year, he just said, babe, didn't get your card. Here's a link. And he had found Barefoot in the Park for me and sent me a link, which I thought was such a cute little teenager.
That is sweet.
That is very sweet.
When they show effort, you get all excited when they do something.
When they show effort or unexpected kindness or consideration, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Especially teenage boys, right?
I have 2 girls. Bridget has a boy.
I have a boy.
So
I have a boy
knows,
and a girl. Yeah.
Envy you that. The baby I lost was my daughter.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Lucy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, she lived 6 months, I had that, but no, I am a boy mom, and my older son and his wife are about to make us grandparents.
Oh, that's exciting.
Oh, that's
a boy.
It's a boy.
And a boy should get a girl. I don't think so. I'm just saying, but I'm just so excited. And at least this way, I don't have to change any of my thinking, right? I don't have to get out of the habit of calling everybody buddy, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You're safe.
My youngest sister had 3 little girls, and we would all vacation together when they were little, and I just called everybody buddy, or then through all the sports clubs years, they were both basketball players. You get into the habit of saying appalling things that you hear, like "nut up, princess," and I'm a boy's mom.
You'll get that granddaughter sooner or later. She will be spoiled.
I'm just excited. But yes, if there is ever a grand girl, boy, manicures, tea parties,
everything. But my girl was a tomboy when she was little, so she didn't want any of that. But then now she does. She's 20. She'll be 27 this week, and now she does. But she did not.
so much fun,
It
right?
is fun. It
It
is.
is fun. I'm not,
Yes.
yeah, I'm not gonna say it is fun, but I have a son-in-law now, so I kind of like have a boy.
Do you?
Yes.
Oh.
So I'm on, let's hope grandma watching the next couple of years. So,
Yeah.
So exciting.
I know
Yeah.
it's like no pressure. Can I have a grandchild
What,
now?
you all pregnant yet?
I know. My
We ran into
daughter.
a buzzsaw with that. We ran into a buzzsaw with that, not to
Oh,
be,
yeah.
not to be getting
Yes.
in the face about that. So we learned to be very quiet and very grateful. And it was just a wonderful moment when they
Yes.
presented us, with
Yeah.
that.
I know. They
Oh,
have to do it on their timing,
Sure.
unfortunately, not ours.
Yeah.
my son and daughter-in-law both are very career oriented, and they're dying to have a family, but she is finishing her PhD. So yes, this had to be.
That's what mine just started her PhD. She goes,
There you go.
Mom, let me get the first couple of years in, get settled. And I'm like,
There
fine.
you go. Boy, hats off to these girls, right? Hats off.
They are.
Oh, my goodness.
So what are you looking forward to over the next couple of years besides becoming a grandma? Do you think you'll keep acting or?
Yeah, what I'm on that to-do list with get more fluent in social media. I'm working on the balance right now. What I found, I had some ongoing projects during COVID. I was in Bosch, the Amazon series, and we shot the last season of that in the fall of 2020. So before there were any vaccines or anything. I was still working a little bit on Grey's Anatomy at that point, and I love that for you. Actually, the pilot, we were all signed to the pilot in March of 2020, and then everything shut down. So it was a surprise when right at Christmas time in 2020, we got the news that we were going to be, is that right? Yeah, 2021, that we were going to be shooting the pilot in March of 2021. So I kind of was working on all those projects that I already had lined up. So at this point, I've really kind of gotten, I'm sitting back to a certain extent, kind of going, what falls in my lap? Because in the meantime, I have a very full life. You don't suddenly turn off a switch and say, I am no longer an actress, because it's something, a gift you were given. So it's not, so that's why it's difficult. I'm not saying I want to retire. I do not want to retire. But at the same time, there are all these other wonderful things in my life that are very interesting. And I kind of want that balance right now. So right now I'm post-pandemic, I'm trying to rebalance back a little bit in favor of the career, because things got a little bit out of balance to all the other things that you could do happily on Zoom, in being involved with schools and whatever, so and then there's just the marketing girls. Can we just talk about husbands ever stop eating? You lose the kids, you think it's going to be easier, but it's like, oh my gosh, I still got to keep the market. He still kind of would be thrilled if I cooked dinner several times. So, it just all goes on.
These are so many topics that our listeners will write in.
Can relate to. Yes.
Can relate. Thanks for mentioning that. I
Oh
don't think enough women talk about this or that.
Right. It's like all the women who talk, I listen to these interviews and I think, do you ever have to go to the market? And if so, how are you so much a better person than I am? How are you so much more talented? Because, it's like, I would love to write a book or something, but, I got to figure out a way to stop having to go to the market. and the laundry.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right before we did this today, I not only was doing laundry, but I made that mistake of leaving things in the dryer too long. I actually had to bust out this ironing board this morning.
Oh, no.
Oh, I got to get in time. I'm doing a podcast, but let me see if I can get this ironing.
Yeah.
It's like, right? This is their lives.
And most of the next generation are like, what is an iron?
What's an iron? I don't have an iron.
What do I do with that? Just
What's that thing? It's so funny.
Thank you so much
for
coming to talk to us today. It was an absolute pleasure.
This was fun. You were hilarious.
thank
You were so
you.
fun to, and relatable.
And
Yes.
fingers crossed that I love that for you.
Yes, well, everybody watch it. It's on
Oh
Showtime.
yeah.
It's just such a wonderful show. And that trifecta of Vanessa Bayer, Jennifer Lewis, and Molly Shannon, right? And the rest of us are pretty darn
Yes.
good too.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm going to say it is a wonderful show, and I hope everybody watches it.
Yes. Yes.
definitely.
It's really
And we will
cute.
have it.
Is it
link all the
Showtime?
information in the show notes.
Yeah. Is
Great.
it Showtime? I can't.
It is Showtime.
It's
It is
Showtime
on-
because I was watching it. I was like, which one of these streaming services?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
now you have a choice of a million, like you
Yeah.
were saying before, ABC, NBC, CBS. That
Yes.
was your choice.
That's where those were
Maybe
your choices.
PBS, if you
Yeah.
yeah.
That was it.
And now,
Yeah.
oh gosh.